Hello. Our theme for exploring Christian animism in this session is everything is sacred. This is the second of our Christian animist principles. The first is everything is alive. Everything is sacred. Everything is connected. Everything is person. Everything is nurtured. And everything is respected. To get us thinking around the whole subject of everything is sacred, I want to quote the words of William Blake. Everything that lives is holy. Life delights in life. They're great, aren't they? Graham Harvey, talking about animism, says this: all that exists lives, and all that lives is holy. So the sacred, the holy, is right at the heart of all things. Daniel Quinn is a novelist who uses writing stories, novels, as a way of communicating, thinking about animism. And when asked, what is animism? He replies, the world is a sacred place and a sacred process, and we're part of it. The world is a sacred place, and humanity belongs in such a world. So we're seeing that sacredness is right at the very heart of the animist understanding of the world and the cosmos, and therefore it's right at the heart of a Christian animist understanding of all things. Let's hear the voices of Indigenous people around our theme that everything is sacred. I'm going to begin by listening to the voices of Aboriginal Australians. For them, the land is everything. And for them, the land above all else is sacred. Aboriginal Australians believe that creative ancestors called the Dreamings took on many forms and often moved from one form to another as they shaped the sacred landscape of Australia. And everywhere they moved, everywhere they traveled, they left parts of themselves within the landscape. And yet they always kept traveling, and everywhere they went, they were giving birth to new cultures, new languages, and new songs. The places that the Dreamings traveled, the places where they stopped, where they lived, where they moved on, crisscross the whole of the continent. And the stories and the realities and the marks of their movement make up the sacred geography of Australia. The Dreaming. I'm sure you've all heard of it. But what do you understand about it? In fact, Aboriginal Australians will argue that Europeans are almost incapable of really understanding the Dreaming. But here is how they talk about it in very simple terms to try and help us understand. They say we start with nothing, a total emptiness, a void. Then there is some singing and some dancing. And the singing creates the sound, and the vibration forms the shape of things, and the dancing helps to solidify it. The dancing is making the form stand out, whether as a tree or a bird or the land or something else. The process, the dreaming itself, then becomes reality, something we can work with and something we can see. It's very easy for Europeans and people of Western culture to sort of think that the dreaming is simply another way of talking about the creation story. Well, it is the creation story, but it's not something that simply happened as an original event sometime in the past. The dreaming is as real now to the Aboriginal people as it has ever been. It's a past continuous expression of reality. It's mysterious, it's timeless, it's an every when at the heart of Aboriginal culture and spirituality. It provides power and the eternal principles that tie them to both the land and the spirit in a deeply complex way. I'm sure you've heard of songlines. The songline of an ancestor is the path that they took in forming the land in the dreaming. So when an Aboriginal walks that same songline and sings the same song that their ancestors sang millennia ago, they actually become part of the ancestor themselves and part of the continuing creation of the land that both exists but also is being created as they walk and as they sing. All this is what the Aboriginal people mean when they refer to their land and to everything as being sacred. During this session, we're going to talk quite a bit about the concept of enchantment. Very simply, it means to sing into another, to sing into something, to make things happen as a result of song. And the Aboriginal experience and practice of the dreaming is the most powerful introduction of thinking around the idea of enchantment. The songs and the songlines musically embody the properties of reality. So reality is made up and held together by song. The songs and the songlines are like the equations that describe reality and the forces that make it work. They hold the external world together and they bind it into the dreaming itself. The songs that they sing come from the ancestors. They have been handed down through the generations, and they have been replenished through dreams. The songs and the songlines are, in effect, the cosmic rhythms and melodies that give the everyday world its form. Now hold that thought, hold that understanding as we begin to move into hearing biblical voices and their proclamation that everything is sacred. The word sacred is a powerful word in every culture. In biblical Hebrew, it's shaped by two key words, which are found in the words in Isaiah chapter 6, verse 3. Again, many of you may well know them. Holy, holy, holy is the divine. The whole earth is filled with God's glory. The word holy in Hebrew is kadosh. And it's the very essence of divine being. It's probably best translated by our English word unique. And first and foremost, it expresses the qualities of God's character. The second word is kavod, glory. Now, the important thing about kavod is that it conveys this idea of weight, substance, presence. There's tremendous strength in the word. It also has a sense of beauty and brilliance and outshining. So the presence of glory is the true heart of sacredness. So when we say everything is sacred, we're saying everything expresses the qualities of divine character, the weight and substance, beauty, brilliance, and outshining of divine presence in sacredness. The word and the concept of spirit is the essence of the sacred. And it's interesting that in the biblical text, spirit is linked directly to the four primary elements of wind, fire, water, and earth. Gas, plasma, liquid, solid, which make up all the material reality of the cosmos. Biblically, wind or breath is there at the very beginning, the first creation story of this wind, breath, spirit of the divine moving over the waters before creation of the earth has begun, right through, and then we re-encounter it again, time and time again, and we reach it in the Shavuot wind, the wind in the upper room, when the disciples of Jesus were filled with the Spirit. Fire and spirit are found in the story of the burning bush, going all the way through to the Pentecost flame on the heads of the disciples of Jesus when they received the Spirit. Water is always sacred and spirit-filled. We have the story of the desert rock struck by Moses, which brought water to the Israelites in their wilderness wanderings, right through to Jesus standing in the temple precinct at Tabernacles when the libations of water are being poured out, he cries out, if anyone thirsts, come to me and I will give them living water. So the link between water and spirit is constantly there, and earth herself, from the sculpting of the first human by divine hands with the clay of the earth, the ruach, the breath of God, breathing into the clay and it becoming a living being, through to Jesus taking clay, spitting on it, turning it into mud, putting it on the eyes of a blind person and bringing about their healing. Spirit and clay and soil and earth are inseparably intertwined throughout the biblical story. Isaiah 44:24, we hear God saying, I am the one who made all things. That being so, all things are sacred. Psalm 24, verse 1, the earth is God's and everything in it. So again, the earth and everything in it is sacred. Now, Isaiah 66, verse 1, we have these words. God says, the sky is my throne and earth is my footstool. I have to confess that when I used to come across this verse as a young adult, it kind of didn't do too much for me. It just seemed rather odd, the sky being like a throne and the earth being like a footstool. It kind of didn't connect. But as I've studied indigenous cultures, and as I've reflected on ancient Hebrew indigenous understanding of the world and the cosmos, these words have begun to have a profound effect on me. They are the Hebrew indigenous way of saying everything is sacred. The sky, the vastness of the skies, of the throne of God, and the earth is the divine footstool. Across indigenous cultures, feet are always seen as really, really important because they are the part of our anatomy that connects with earth. In Navajo physiology, if you were to study Navajo physiology, you would begin by studying the feet because they connect us with Mother Earth. Biblically, you will see time and again, feet are referred to not just as connecting us to earth, but actually the means by which as we walk, as we move, we bring shalom, peace, to creation. Again, the sacredness of all things is clearly present in this idea. Earth as paradise. If we go to the second creation story in the book of Genesis, we're told that in Eden, the sound of the divine moving within the garden in the breeze of the day. Here we have this image of paradise and the divine moving through paradise, the breeze, the wind, the breath of the day, and everything encountering and being embraced by the divine, including the original couple. And we know that the whole of the earth is sacred, and the whole of the earth is paradise shimmering to be discovered by those who will learn how to do so and how enable its reality become visible to experience. How often have you walked out in the countryside, perhaps through an avenue of trees or in a forest, and you've looked up and you thought, oh, the whole of nature just seems like a temple. The earth as a temple is a very, very powerful image. I love the fact that the Hebrew word for desert comes from the same root word that is used to describe the most holy place, the Holy of Holies within the Jerusalem temple. The desert is the holy place. The whole of creation, the whole earth is holy and sacred. You ask a Bedouin where you're most likely to encounter the Spirit. And without hesitation, everyone will tell you in the heart of the desert, because everything is sacred. The language of the sacred also throws up another word, the word profane. This is the dark side of sacred. Well, it's a Latin word which means simply outside the temple. However, with the whole earth and all creation being sacred, being the temple, any notion of profane must refer to that which corrupts, perverts, and contaminates that which is holy and that which is sacred. And those of us wanting to live with that recognition that everything is sacred, those must be the things that we challenge and we work to put right in our world today. That which corrupts, perverts, or contaminates that which is holy. Biblically, declaring everything is sacred affirms that all things are sourced and rooted in God. And as a result, they invite respect and also a response. Remember, sacred is never a neutral term. It must always be understood as expressing the qualities of the divine character. So as we move through the sacred earth, the sacred creation, we're called to move with and to display the character and qualities of the divine. Which leads me to two words: incarnation and enchantment. They're words you probably haven't seen put together in the way that I'm doing, but to me they very definitely go together. And I've called them the confluence, the flowing together of the divine and the sacred. Incarnation is a spiritual word, but as I'll comment in a minute, it does have a shadow side. Enchantment is a magical word, which also has a shadow side. When Christians hear the word incarnation, they immediately think of Jesus. Theology talks about the incarnation, but the word incarnation literally means any embodiment in the flesh. But it does have that sense of an embodiment of something that is greater than ourselves, a physical materialization of something greater becoming present in terms of our senses and encounter. Enchantment, we've already briefly touched on this word when we were talking about the Aboriginal understanding of the dreaming. And I said then that it means to sing into another. It's that singing that makes reciprocal connection, awakening new depths of relationship. The Aboriginal Australians walk the songline, singing. They walk paths that are established, but their songs renew them and recreate them. Something dramatic is happening. That is enchantment. When you think of incarnation, what responses do you associate with that idea? I'm suggesting amazement, wonder, awe, astonishment, perplexity. I'm going to be arguing in a moment that incarnation is much more than just a focus on the person of Jesus of Galilee. But if we read the Gospels and the stories about him, what are the kind of reactions we hear from crowds and people who meet him? Amazement, wonder, awe, astonishment, and perplexity. Then enchantment. What are the responses? They're subtle. They're beautiful. They're alluring. Enchantment allures us. It charms us. It's delicate. It's delightful. It's wonderful. It's spellbinding. I'm going to have quite a bit more to say about enchantment in our sessions together. But here we're talking about creation singing into us, alluring, charming, in delicate, delightful, wonderful, spellbinding ways. Now, I said that incarnation has a shadow side, because yes, you can have the incarnation of evil. But that's not where we're going when we're talking about everything is sacred. Enchantment also has a shadow side. Its historical, magical connections have involved the word has been used about casting spells and trapping people. But again, when we're thinking of everything being sacred, we're looking at enchantment in its true sense. That's singing beautiful things into another. Both incarnation and enchantment are an encounter with the sacred. Let's pick this up. The Spirit as incarnation, expressing the divine. I'm deeply struck by the words in Luke chapter 3, verse 22. They're part of the story of Jesus being baptized by John the Baptist in the River Jordan. And it said, after he was baptized, the Holy Spirit descended upon Jesus in bodily form as a dove. Those are astonishing words. The Spirit is so present within nature, in creation. The Spirit is present in bodily form. And when we talk about the incarnation in terms of Jesus, which we will do in a moment or two, people will talk about, well, what do we know about the Galilean Jesus? How did he feel? How did he think? What were his emotions? So I'm asking, what about the dove, the rock dove? A physical incarnation of the sacred spirit. She appears and she's gone. But what was her experience as a bird? Her feelings, her experiences. Something quite profound here. And this encounter, we're encountering in an actual bird, the incarnation of the sacred spirit. And that, of course, as we're going to see, is true in so many other dimensions of creation. And we'll return to make a final comment about this right at the very end of our time together. Creation as incarnation is a proclamation of the divine. Psalm 19, 1-4 says this: the heavens are telling the glory of God. The skies proclaim the divine handiwork. Day to day pours forth speech. Night to night declares knowledge. There is no speech, nor are there words. Their voice is not heard, yet their voice goes out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. Here is creation, the whole of creation, declaring that everything is sacred. And communicating that reality in the process. Now, with those words in mind, let's move to the early Christian document, the letter to the Romans, at the very beginning, chapter 1, verses 19 and 20. We hear these words: for what can be known about God is plain. Ever since the creation of the world, God's eternal power and divine nature, invisible though they are, have been understood and seen through the things God has made. Here, creation as incarnation is a revelation of the divine. The whole of creation reveals God's eternal power, divine nature, so there can be no mistake. I mean, this is astonishing. We could spend much more time, and probably will on other occasions, thinking about the implications of this. Creation discloses everything as being sacred. We have direct encounters with God in creation, in nature. God is there. God moves as the wind blowing through paradise of Eden. God moves through the whole of creation. The divine is present. The Spirit flows through all things. Creation is incarnation. Here is where we encounter the divine. In Acts 17, verse 28, we have an early Christian preaching in Athens to animists, quoting one of their own poets, the one in whom we live and move and have our being, is how the poet described the sacred, the divine. And that is, those words are affirmed as being absolutely true. Amongst Christians today, the word panentheism has become very popular. It is an exciting word. It means God in everything and everything in God. The sort of baptism of all things into the divine, the flowing through all things of the divine, the experiencing of everything as sacred. This is the environment in which we live and move and have our being. What does this mean? I use the word panentheism. I find it helpful, but also I want to say there's more. It's one of a number of ways of thinking and talking about the relationship between the divine and reality finding its expression within the divine. So reflect on it. We're beginning to realize when we're talking about everything being sacred, that in fact, we're running out of language to really do the truth justice. Now, we've already mentioned that when you hear the word incarnation, certainly within the Christian community, Christ is identified as Jesus of Galilee, is seen as the incarnation of God. Now, different ones of you will have different takes and understandings on such a declaration. But the question to ask is, if the whole of creation is incarnation, why do we have a specific emphasis on a human being being an incarnation? Well, I just want to make one key point, and there are many others that we could make. I believe that this is important because we as human beings are the people who have misunderstood, who have profaned the truth that everything is sacred, directly and specifically. And so a human incarnation focuses that truth. And yet also reminds us of the fact that we are made in the image and likeness of God, and we too are incarnations within creation. And to what extent are we seeing that being a reality in our experience? I'll leave that there. We can come back to it, as I'm sure we will, and talk in more detail another time. But I want to remain with Jesus for a moment and make the point that Jesus' incarnation doesn't make matter sacred. I hope I've made that point very clearly already. But I can remember being told as a young adult that, it was Jesus' incarnation that made matter sacred. That was rubbish. The fact that God can become quite naturally human or expressed through any other form as a rock dove or within a tree or within the animal kingdom, the plant kingdom, shows that everything is already sacred. And Jesus makes this point so powerfully when in what we call the Last Supper, he took a loaf of bread and at the start of the meal, broke it, gave it to his disciples and said, "This is my body." He didn't say, next time you have a meal, say some magic words and this will become my body. He didn't say, next time you have a chunk of bread when you're eating a meal, remember this symbolizes my body. He said, "This is my body." Creation, reality is in a profound, mysterious, miraculous, magical way the body of God. It's not a symbol, it's reality. And once you begin to recognize that as being true, whenever you share a meal with other people, you can expect things to happen. How can they not happen if everything is sacred? And if they're not happening, then we probably haven't recognized enough that everything is sacred. Isn't that exciting to explore? Let's pick up enchantment again. Singing into another, singing into us. And I want to focus on Psalm 148, verses 1 to 12, where we have this astonishing statement about the whole of creation singing, making a noise, praising. The Hebrew word is halal. The skies, the mountains, the invisibles, the sun, the moon, the stars, the stratosphere, the clouds, the earth, the sea creatures, fire, hail, snow, frost, stormy wind, mountains, hills, fruit trees, cedar trees, wild animals, cattle, creeping things, birds, humans. The whole of creation, the whole environment is just full of this singing, this interflow of enchantment. It's ringing with enchantment. And to remind ourselves of the words we looked at a little bit ago, Psalm 19, there is no speech, nor are there words. Their voice is not heard, and yet their voice goes through all the earth. I believe enchantment works at so many levels, and we'll come back to other levels on other occasions. You're all familiar, I'm sure, with the word biophilia, the love of life, the love of being alive within creation. The fact that you walk into a forest, you walk by the sea, you walk on a high mountain, and you just feel this connection. Something is happening. That's enchantment. That's the flow of the song of the Spirit, stirring the heart of every molecule within creation. So the birds are singing out of sheer joy. The rocks are singing even though you can't hear them. The skies are singing. It's just the most, enchantment is the most phenomenal dimension of everything being sacred. It's there in the biblical text, although the word isn't used in the way that I'm using it now. I want to go back to the indigenous experience and to tell you a story that I came across from the Yanomami people of the northern Brazilian rainforest. They believe at the edge of the world, where the sky meets the earth, there are ancient amoahai song trees growing. They have blindingly white trunks, which are formed out of constantly moving lips that sing the most beautiful, ever-changing, never-ceasing songs. They tell you the like of which you will never hear anywhere else. The Akspiri, the forest spirits, take up these songs. They begin to sing them and bring those songs to fill the canopy of the forest with music. This is enchantment. That's the way they see and understand enchantment. So beautiful, so profound. The question is, how do we see it as Krishna animists? How do we understand it? I believe there's a whole journey of both incarnation and enchantment that we've hardly even begun yet when it comes to really engaging with the world. which is sacred. But just to conclude, from a contemporary perspective, that everything is sacred. One of the fascinating things for me has been discovering the way in which indigenous cultures, thousands of years old, have discovered realities and truths about creation that we today, with quantum physics, are only just beginning to touch. Quantum physics, just to give one example, suggests that you cannot draw a dividing line between the observer and the observed, which is fully endorsed by the Aboriginal, Australian Aboriginal understanding that the sacred world was sung into existence by the ancestors, by the dreaming, yet continues to need the maintenance of song. Isn't that a beautiful phrase? The maintenance of song. But in their identification with the land, the Aboriginals are at once both objects and subjects, both singers and the song. And I believe that that is a whole dimension of enchantment from a Christian animist perspective. In the light of what I've been trying to share, we really, really need to be embracing. It's been commented, ironically, it's in the pursuit of the ultimate building blocks of matter that quantum physicists have encountered a world that exhibits the same traits as found in the Aboriginal dream. More on that another time. These are some thoughts that I penned some years ago. As a Christian, the true nature of the vibrant physical reality we call matter must include spirit, with spirit as part of the very structure of matter, being essential to its reality. It's not that matter without spirit would not be alive, rather that without spirit, matter would not exist. A foundational reason for understanding that in fact everything is indeed sacred. I want to share 5 words that are really, really important to me around the subject of the sacredness of matter. They intertwine with each other, they flow into each other, and all I can do is point you towards them and encourage you to think about them. They are mystery, medicine, magic, miracle, and meaning. Mystery is a reminder that in a world in which everything is sacred, there is a power and a presence for us to discover more and more about. The word medicine comes, of course, from the culture of the Native Americans, where they see the sacredness of all things, the power and the presence of the Spirit, bringing protection, healing, prosperity in terms of all the things that they need, and harmony. The word magic is more familiar with European paganism. It's a fascinating word, but at its heart, it's challenging us to recognize that our perception of what we think is reality is so much more different than we can really, really comprehend. There is power, there is mystery, there is perception, which we need to take time to get to understand even better as a result of the fact that everything is sacred. Miracle is probably a much more Christian word. And here we have not only the power of amazing things happening, but the amazing things that happen actually communicate truth. Have a look at the Gospels. Notice how on every occasion when Jesus does a miracle, in one way or another, it points towards, it illustrates a truth that he is teaching or incarnating in the way that he lives. Because everything is sacred, miracles communicate truth. And that truth points towards, my last word, meaning, the power and the purpose of why all things are sacred. I'll leave it there. But please take those 5 words, mystery, medicine, magic, miracle, and meaning, and think about them. Finally, to quote Graham Harvey, although the whole world is sacred, it has special places and powerful places. To some, these are simply places where the potent life of earth is obvious. To others, they are places where the life force of earth wells up. I'm sure you, as I do, know those experiences, places where something is special. Unfortunately, some people talk about them as thin places, but that's the language of dualism. Don't use that phrase. They are deep places. They are places where the sacred is deep and profound. It's also there in person. There was a rock dove that hovered over Jesus of Galilee when he was baptized, which was a deep incarnation and expression of the sacred, as he himself also was. But I've met many other people who are deep expressions of the sacred in the way they live, and many, many places that have that uniqueness that just leaves me literally spellbound. Thank you.